Okay, and we are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. My bank counselor for Ward 6. I'm going to call to meeting the local option levy oversight committee for June 17, 2026. Let's start with introductions. I'm Mai, and then we'll just kind of go around the table and then we'll hop on.
Jennifer Keller, Parks and Rec Manager.
I am Rob Romanak, Parks Planning Manager.
Hi, Gretchen Bennett, Community Services Director.
Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer.
Hallie Leinenbach, Budget Manager. Kelly Blake-Schmidt, Budget Analyst.
Regina Scudda, City Librarian.
Jane Holmich here. I'm the representative from Parks and Rec, which kind of seems silly, but that's okay.
We enjoy being here.
Yeah.
All right, let's hop online and David, you are the big screen in front of me, so we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm David Levy.
Then we'll go with Councilor Brown, Dr. Brown.
Hello, everyone. Councilor Brown here, Ward 5.
And then Jim, I think I see you on there.
Jivu, member at large.
And then I see Courtney.
Hi, everyone. Courtney Knox Bush, Assistant City Manager, Director for Strategy and Engagement.
All right, moving on the agenda item. I don't believe we have anybody signed up for public comment.
No, ma'am.
All right, then moving on to approval of our April 30th, 2026 meeting minutes.
I move to approve.
Great, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Not from me.
And it looks like we have Councilor Barney joining us. All right, so those who approve the April minutes, say aye.
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 Thank you, passed unanimously. No action items, no new items. Looks like we are on to management updates and information items. Looks like we're gonna be presented with Parks audit first.
Yes, Councilor Bang, thank you. Committee, everybody, this first agenda item is to share with you the results of the audit that was conducted related to the parks team. And so I believe Kelly is going to share the document, but it's also in its entirety for you as part of your packet. So if you haven't had a chance yet to peek but would like to, it's there. And then there's some fun copies circulating too. But this was a focus in on parks. It did not include recreation services. And analysis was conducted between November and March of this past year. And this is part of the broader strategy that our city finance committee is conducting to study performance really across the enterprise. And so there's different focuses of performance measurement at different times and quarters and parts of the city. And this period, we had the opportunity to be taken a look at and get the benefit of their analysis in the parks team. So this is part of that broader performance measurement strategy. The audit team, the company's name Baker Tilly, conforms with generally accepted government auditing standards as part of their work. What I thought I'd do is quickly share commendations and then findings as you'll see developed in the report in much more detail. They did appreciate the care and the commitment from staff that they talked with and recognized that. They appreciated efforts. They heard examples of proactively working to identify equipment or fix or creatively replace or repair equipment to help be efficient and effective, and they were recognizing that. And they appreciated the dedicated volunteer coordination efforts that we have going on in parks, so I want to appreciate that as well. There were a number of areas where they offered us some recommendations and findings. The first one was around the area of having more specific maintenance standards. You'll see a discussion that might be an example of like how frequently we mow the type of park or the specific work that we do around maintenance in parks and what is recommended there. And they suggested having a more precise and specific schedule that clarifies exactly when we would do what in what type of area. This is also where we got into some interesting discussion about peer benchmarking. I found the peer benchmarking to be tricky. Part of the audit was that they took a look at 5 other areas. They took a look at Bend and Eugene, for example, the Willamette Lane area, and they tried to do some analysis to help us understand. And it can be challenging to get to apples and apples, but it gave us some data and sense there. I'd also, while we're on that page, refer folks who are curious about the detail to loop into the appendix A of the report. It gives a more complete picture of the peer benchmarking that they provided. But certainly within this maintenance area, we're going to be taking steps to formalize and add additional detail and clarity to the maintenance standards that we did have. Kelly, if you scroll down to you'll see the report offers advice and findings. And so you can see the analysis that they're offering us with the research that they provided. And then the way the report is formatted, it gets into the management comments or management response. And so that starts to share where we'll be working at it. And the comment I'll make about peer benchmarking is just that we're gonna need to take it in the context of the broader team. Like I noticed some of the other areas have larger overall teams, and we don't have that size of larger team. And so we're needing to make sure that the maintenance standards that we establish take into account what we have in our capacity here in Salem, if that makes sense. And for example, Eugene has a lot more bodies. They also are demonstrating more acreage than we have, but it's tricky to sort that out precisely. But that's probably not relevant. What I'm meaning to tell you is we're going to be tightening up the precision of the maintenance standards. And I think that'll be helpful for a communications piece as well for the community who's often curious, when are you going to be mowing this area or working on this landscaping bed, for example. I'll pause there. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm Jean, and I live in Grant neighborhood.
Yes.
The smallest park in the whole city, which is and the thing I noticed was that as far as like that garbage pickup, stellar. They do that pretty well. Mowing's gotten better, but we have a volunteer crew that comes out of our neighborhood association, which I'm sure you don't count at all, because we've never thought about telling you what they do and when and how often.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if that happens with other neighborhoods, but that would make your volunteer program undercounted.
What a good thought. And I'm sure there's a lot of efforts that happen. Jen, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
So we typically do register those events, but I'm sure there are some that are unrecognized by us, but we certainly encourage those groups to work with our volunteer coordinators.
They know,
I
I can tell you that right now.
So I can have her kind of reach out to the neighborhood association and stuff, so that way that information can get input, so it does help kind of quantify what they're doing, how much time they're spending, and those things.
And call me, because I am actually the treasurer and I collect the data from the volunteers.
Good, thank you.
And that's what made me think about it. All, 10 hours, but
It
a
adds
little
up.
bit adds up.
It really does. Thank you for the work that's happening there.
It's small, because it's so small, weeds show up pretty quickly. Yeah.
Anything else on the maintenance standards part?
Gretchen,
Alright.
question on that?
Of course, Jen, go ahead.
What has the maintenance schedule and if they're saying that it needs to be more formal, what has the structure and our baseline been?
Thank you, Jen. Would you want to speak to that?
So what we have now is we do have for example, a mowing schedule of when we're hitting what parks and with what frequency, whether it's a developed park or an undeveloped park. I think some of the level of detail is we haven't really codified and put in writing with consistency on specific maintenance activities that are performed in those parks. So with what level of frequency. So when we go out to empty the garbage or clean a restroom, what exactly are the tasks that are happening when you're cleaning a restroom? And what level of frequency is that happening? So we do that once a day. But in some parks, maybe do we need to do it more than once a day based on the use or the type of park? And then what do those tasks look like? So we haven't, there's room for improvement, certainly to kind of articulate that and to put that more in a written context for staff so they have an understanding of what those expectations are and the public has an expectation of what those standards are. So we've done some, but not to the level of detail that is helpful and informative as it realistically needs to be.
Now, has there been complaints or issues regarding the public in terms of like the need, like other parks that are more prioritized or focused in on because there are more complaints about it or a focus point of higher use?
I might give a try on that, Jim, I think part of this does create an opportunity for looking at equity, but I think as somebody who does take questions from the community, one of the things that I've noticed is it would just be helpful to be really specific about when we get somewhere. That might be one of the ways I think this tool will help us, is someone will say, well, hey, I'm noticing this at this park. And to be able to have the document to refer to and say, oh, this is what you can expect with the capacity that we have. Jen, I don't know if that's good or if you want to add.
No, I think that's exactly and valid, but it is, there's different types of maintenance certainly that happens at different types of parks depending on the usage, depending if there's reservable areas, depending if there's sports fields, depending all of those things. All are at different varying levels of maintenance and standards. Certain areas bring in revenue to the city, and so the standard may be different because it's bringing revenue in and it has to be a certain level to be able to reserve that versus perhaps a neighborhood park in reality that doesn't have that same threshold or that same level of use. So it's certainly varying. And it's fair to say we do hear from the community with regard to all levels and all aspects of parks and their potential dissatisfaction.
Well, general speaking, it's kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but I think in terms of overall structure, need and desires, do we have a baseline gauge of the resources that are available for parks, the service level that we have expectation, what is the gap, if there is one, and in terms of correlating that with, citizen satisfaction. So just kind of the measurables throughout that process. And if we're putting time and resources into them, that the expectation is there's a behavior or a quality component to it that's measurable. So we can actually, recognize if we're spending resources in a wise way to receive the outcomes that we're seeking.
Jim, thank you. I think that'll also relate to a finding later, which is developing more outcome-based performance measures for the work that we're doing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David, you were lighting up. Do you have something to add?
No, not at this time, no.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Anything else, Jen, on that? Okay. Another area is in the realm of asset management. Parks had begun to input records of the different assets that we have in the park system into the city's database so that we have a solid picture of that, and this reinforced continuing to accomplish that we need to continue along that path and get all of our assets fully mapped and in that database. So that's really what finding number 2 speaks to. Right. There was another subsection of the report that talks about volunteerism and about supplemental labor. And the first part focusing a bit on supplemental labor, this includes community service workers who might have a court direction to complete community services in lieu of other fines or incarceration time, for example, and then also our ability to add seasonal workers that can come on and help us during parts of the times of the year. And this had a recommendation that the there was a fee that had been built into the fee schedule for the city to charge a fee of community service workers to complete their service as a part of that. And that actually is in line with some other communities, but the audit was recommending taking a look at that. And that work has already been implemented. The fee schedule, which is set to take effect July 1, already eliminates that fee. So we would anticipate seeing an increase again in folks that can come through not having that fee be a barrier. A second part of this is taking a look at seasonal workers. Jen, I think you'd say this better than me. I think what I understand is that it can be difficult to recruit seasonals to return because we don't have a structure that sees ability for a person to earn an increased wage year over year. But we'd like to take advantage of the expertise and the experience that can come from returning seasonals. And so trying to take a look at, is there a way to incent seasonals with different pay structures to reward talent and experience?
Yes, exactly.
Great, so we have to do some work on trying to understand what our opportunities are within budget and within human resources rules. But that's another area of suggestion. Any other questions or comments in the world of supplemental labor?
Has the idea been explored to look at, private vendors to be able to be contracted?
I don't know, Jen.
So we have done that in the past. The city currently has a contract, Parks utilized them in previous years with a landscape company. The focus really has been more in right-of-way work than in parks work. What we found, at least a few years ago when we did that analysis, kind of comparing private contract versus city employees, seasonal staff, is the cost was higher for a contract company than it was for seasonal staffing. So we didn't pursue it except on a minimal level within the parks system, but it was utilized back then and continues to be utilized for right-of-way work.
I mean, I guess the reason I asked that, if the needs that we're trying to have is continuity in terms of institutional knowledge with that, if there's seasonal work that goes along with it, and in terms of the benefits and the employment package, looking at that complete ROI, that if the institutional knowledge is valuable in that seasonal contract with a third-party vendor, then those fiscal responsibilities and recurring fiscal responsibilities wouldn't lie within the city, and it could be a variable with a third-party vendor.
The third-party vendor we typically had used in the past was adult and custody crews. That had been the vehicle for contracted services predominantly. Years ago, we started with 6 AIC crews, 4 from the state, 2 from Santiam, 2 from Mill Creek, and then 2 Marion County crews. Over the years, those crews have gone away from the city. Their focus has either been that they've closed the institutional facility so they no longer support the crews, or the focus has been to use them on state departments as opposed to other jurisdictional departments. We were down to 1 AIC crew, a Marion County crew, and out of 6 original ones. And unfortunately, the end of last week, we were notified that they were abolishing that program. At this point, they're saying permanently through Marion County because they can't support that program through the county. So we're looking at other alternative locations that may have a similar type of program, whether it's a county program, for example, like through Polk County, or whether it's a state program, for example, Coffee Creek up in Portland, some different entities that may or may not have available resources like that. But typically those are difficult. They're few and far between and usually don't become readily available. If they're pretty locked up and secured with other commitments, but we're pursuing those. And that is something that will be a large impact to parks. Those crews are 6 to 10 staff per day that help provide support. So that's over the years been a huge detriment for parks. So potentially, you were looking at up to 60 additional supplemental staff at one time to help support parks. And we were down to 6 to 10 and now 0. So that's a large impact.
That's a
But
great
what
point.
about private business? I guess my ask is, what about private business and RFPs?
So we have done that in the past, and again, referencing my earlier comments, the contractor, the current contract, GT Landscapes. So we did go out for bid, we did solicit from private entities. At the time, we had 2 responders to perform that work. So there wasn't, at least at that time, a lot of response and interest in doing that on behalf of the city. Like I said, we do currently utilize one. It's limited for parks, and the focus again has been kind of right away and highway fund money as opposed to general fund or levy fund dollars. The rates are currently the current rate is $1,600 a day for a private contract company.
Jim, I want to ask you a clarifying question to see if I'm tracking. Would you be asking if we can evaluate or compare and contrast no longer hiring seasonal workers, but instead contracting out seasonally to a contractor? That same
That's
body
what I would
of
think
work?
about.
I
Yeah,
mean,
and having that more of a need-based and more flexibility as opposed to that, seasonality. And yeah, I think if we're able to, the need that we want with that seasonal work is to maintain some institutional knowledge and continuity, that putting that out to local businesses, private contractors, for private business to be able to do that, that could be an opportunity.
I would just say, and certainly it's something we can visit and look at. I just would throw out that seasonal staff do not just perform maintenance activities. They support events, they close, so they work 7 days a week, all hours at night. Most landscaping companies are not gonna lock restrooms and close restrooms. They're not gonna support recreation events or activities that are happening in the park. So the scope is much more limiting if you just hire a landscape company. So seasonal workers are all encompassing. They perform a lot of aspects through a lot of shifts. They can start at 6 in the morning and they can work till 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. So there's a lot more flexibility in that, but it's certainly aspects of what they do potentially could be looked at from a private company. But a singular private company probably would be difficult to be able to perform all of those functions, all of those times of days.
I think that's fair. I just think be able to specialize and focus in on specific duties might be a better special use or uses for funds and get the best ROI for the money that's spending.
thank you. That's a good line of questioning. That's what we want to continue to do with this aspect of implementing, is examine each of the approaches and what makes the most sense from an efficiency standpoint. That's a good line of questioning. Anything else on supplemental labor? The next area, which is kind of related, is volunteerism. And I think the finding around volunteerism is to continue to work to align the volunteer opportunities that we advertise with the needs in the parks. And I think some of that we recognize that we do. We meet routinely and identify needs and then recruit volunteers to fill those needs. We also support volunteer activities throughout the parks. And as you said, Jean, there's even volunteer efforts happening that we may not get to connect with, but focusing in on doing more of that kind of visible recruitment of volunteers that reflect our area, as well and focusing in on how to meet needs in the parks with more volunteers, and increasing the metrics and the data that we have and communicate about the volunteers as well as part of this section. Any discussion around volunteerism? Yeah.
I was struck by a statement, I think it was in this area, where volunteerism was also driven by tasks that the volunteers themselves prefer over other tasks. And how how you kind of get over that hump, because that's like weed pulling, great. You know, my dad used to pedal the bike around the park sort of as a security thing, wore a vest and pedaled around, and that was high visibility for people. And I haven't seen that in years, and I don't know if that's really appropriate anymore, but I think that would be a huge challenge, is that channeling the task to the volunteers instead of the reverse.
Yeah, so, predominantly the task drives the volunteers, not vice versa. But there, there's a wide spectrum of what people volunteer, types of activities. So some certainly may be helping do trails, some maybe, but, we have like Minto Park Patrol, for example, right? So that's volunteers kind of driving what they want to do because they happen to be in that park, they do that. So for us, that's kind of a group that, as an example, that kind of drives, but there's also a need, so we're not, I guess one thing I would just clarify is we may have somebody who comes out to say, well, gosh, I'd love to, pick daisies out in the field. And so that's what I want to do as a volunteer project. Well, if that's not something that we have a need to happen, we're not gonna let them do it and just say, well, okay, because that's what you want to do. So we try to have conversation to see, well, what's your level of interest in here? We have these ongoing ones and to redirect them. But there are groups, sometimes companies that have like large volumes of folks who want to volunteer, and they'll be specific as in the sense of we want to go to a park, or we have such a large volume that we really want to see where we can help establish some trails or to do some trail work. So, that's a little bit of mix of where a group is expressing interest in what they'd like to do, but it's also being married with where there's a need for that to happen. So I guess that's the only clarification I would provide is we do have folks who do have specific interests, or they have an affinity like Willamette River Keepers, right? We want to do stuff along the river. So given that's what they have an aptitude to do and they have the ability to do that, and if we have a need, then we pair that up with that transpiring. But we don't just, I don't want to mischaracterize that folks just say we want to do this or I have an interest, and then we create something for that to happen so that it, accomplishes that for them. It has to be married up with what our needs are.
It could be the report sort of mischaracterized. So
Yeah, that doesn't.
yeah.
It's a good point though, Jean. I think in volunteerism in general is,
You have to
like
marry the two.
what people want to do and what the work is that needs to get done.
Yeah.
Isn't always the same thing. Yeah, it's really true. It's really true. Yeah. Well, the next category
Can I
of,
just ask?
please, of course,
I'm
Counselor.
trying to remember, I'm thinking of neighborhood associations and the points and the funds they get for communications. Is there a category for volunteer hours?
Yes, there is.
I couldn't remember, I mean, I remember the categories for attending meetings or filling a specific role, but for volunteer activities.
But it's capped and it's very low.
Okay.
But we count it because we count it. And it could be, if we, for example, our volunteers do way more hours than we can count in that communications. So we could pass over to the parks, the excess. Not that it's huge, but every little bit counts. Yeah.
Okay.
Not so we're double counting, but
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Our next finding area relates to planning, and the idea here is let's get that broader system plan about parks modernized. And as luck would have it, Rob is about to launch that work in concert with the larger Our Salem Comprehensive Plan, launching Our Parks planning to modernize and examine what we're doing in our park system. And it'll be a 3-year experience, and more to come on that really soon, but we're looking forward to doing this. It also speaks to enhancing our capital improvement plan tool. We're working on a tool that can account for the cost of ongoing maintenance as we're examining a project idea or work to do in parks. What will that ongoing maintenance cost be? And to be able to factor that in to planning decisions. There's also encouragement to evaluate concepts around total cost of ownership, which kind of relates into what I was just saying about predicting the maintenance. If something comes into the asset system of parks, what is that gonna cost in the future to own that, and are we prepared in planning meaningfully for it? That's really the areas in this section. I don't know if you'd wanna add anything, or if anyone had questions in this area.
I guess the only thing I'd add is that, so speaking of this planning process, we're gonna go through a multi-year process. Initially, one of the first tasks is a lot of data collection, because that's kind of where we're going is more data informed decision making. So I want to make sure we're collecting different kinds of data, but a lot of data about our person that's going to help us as we move forward.
Good. Any thoughts about the planning mentioned here? And the last area, Jim, like you were talking about, is key performance indicators. Looking to identify beyond the measures that we have in place right now, what are the outcome-based performance measures that we can use to evaluate and examine the work, the decisions we make with the resources we have? Are we hitting the mark on what the community is looking for? That's really where this finding is giving us some suggestions on developing more key performance indicators for parks. So we're looking forward to accomplishing this section. Any questions about that area? Very good.
All I can say is tricky.
Yeah, it is, huh?
Hi, this is David. Can you hear me?
I can, David, go right ahead.
Yeah, I did have one question. I don't know if this is the appropriate location or not, but I'm curious if the report or the finders talked about potential partnerships that the park system has with nonprofits in the community in terms of providing resources and staffing and even sponsoring park activities or park days or kind of developing more of a relationship with the private sector.
Oh, thank you. I think that is a great area to build upon. I'm thinking about the sponsorships we have this summer for Movies in the Park that comes right to mind, and some of the others, and that's a wonderful opportunity to leverage partnerships and accomplish more of these objectives. It's a good idea. I think that shows up a bit under the volunteerism section, but maybe not as precisely as you put it.
We do have one example, so we do have some of those partnerships, but we're always certainly looking for opportunities to build and expand on that. But one we've had for probably close to about 5 years now is with, for example, Mission Street Parks Conservancy. That's a nonprofit who helps us with maintaining certain areas of Bush's Pasture Park, and they do some fundraising for aspects of that park. They do some training. They certainly support volunteers within their organization. So, that's a partnership that's been successful. That started as a pilot about 5 years ago and continues, like I said, to be very successful. So we do look for those opportunities where we can expand those types of partnerships.
Yeah. Like Jim was saying, where's the return? Can we find our objectives, and then what aligns the most efficiently to get to goal?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Well, I think building off of David's comment about organizations that are looking for outlets, I know specifically there are just certain volunteer days and like national honor societies within high schools. You have gardening clubs, and just in terms of private business, I know there was, I think, Anthem Strategies, or I think there was a financial planning group that did a trail work with the volunteer of the city a few weeks ago. And, I think putting it out there, reaching out to a group, specifically there's the emerging leaders group within the Chamber of Commerce. There is, National Honor Societies, each of the high schools, and being able to have something that will connect. And I hear all the time of people like, we just need something to do. And when you have a very clear plan of what needs to be done, they have the bodies. So kind of what I've experienced is there's a lot of postage and no address. So if the parks department can put together an address on it, we can have the postage to get us there.
Yeah, I will just think when you're talking about the schools, so I would say within especially the last couple of years, there's been more proactive partnerships between parks and the schools. For example, like a biology club or something, certain classes where they'll want to take on certain aspects in the park, so it's kind of a win-win. They incorporate that with their classroom curriculum as well as maintaining certain areas of the park. So there's been South Salem High School, I would say, is a proponent of that as an example. So that's been within the last couple of years, specifically with regard to high school curriculum and where there can be links there. Although I will say, you know, we do have elementary and middle school kids who like to come out and do volunteer projects. You know, they'll sign up and to come out as a class or as a group and do volunteer stuff. So there is some integration between the two, but there's been more active, I guess, conversations and activities that have been occurring, especially within the last couple of years.
And I won't lose track of NHS and emerging leaders too. We
Yeah.
can double check if we
Right.
tap those two, because they're good ideas.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Manages the creeks that run through town.
Oh. Please, yeah.
Yes, to the extent that the city is involved in their management, it's Public Works Department. They have a section that's focused on stormwater quality. And they have a separate stream crew that actually walks most of the stream channels in the city every year. And yeah, collects data, collects trash, does like this.
They drag a boat through. So not connected with parks, so.
No, that's a Public Works.
That's
It's
a
connected-
public works.
It's
Right.
connected to the city's municipal stormwater discharge permit, and so it's all tied up in, it's really a utility issue, so that's why it's not.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that concludes the discussion about the audit. We're glad for the analysis and are working towards accomplishing the findings over this coming year. Thank you for the ideas that emerged in this conversation. And Chair Bang, I think that our next management update might be Josh for budget.
Great, and it'll be brief. Just wanted to update you all since your last meeting. Your last meeting, we talked about the proposed budget. We now have a recommended budget and we almost have an adopted budget. But going to city council for adoption on the 22nd. And the local option levy fund is included in that recommendation. So with that moving forward, we'll have a new budget on July 1st. And I think, I mean, just for awareness around timing. So the first year we receive funds is the current fiscal year for the local option levy fund that ends June 30. We'll go through the audit process. So we'll bring back the results of the audit. Likely at your December or January meetings. Is there. I see Dr. Brown has a question about follow-up questions to the report. I'm sure I forward those to, I think that would be you, Greg. If you have follow-up questions.
Yes, please. Yes.
But any questions on the budget update or where we're at? Okay.
Josh, when again is the timeline to get us the audit findings? Would that be sometime late fall?
Yeah, that is correct. So late fall or early winter. So, and just to clarify, we're hoping for no audit findings. We're hoping for a completed audit. And usually that happens in late November or December. And often those meetings are hard to schedule in December, so we'll likely come back to this group, whenever your first meeting is for the new calendar year.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions, so I think that concludes the budget update. Continued business facility tour. I think that's the fun part of the agenda.
That is the part of the agenda, and before we move into the actual fun part of the agenda, I just wanted to flag for you, we have in mind to go to visit Center 50 Plus in September. So our meeting would physically be over at Center 50 on Portland Road. And then to come and visit Salem Public Library in December. So again, visiting the library over on Liberty Road, if that sounds good in the winter. But we've got a sunny day, and so we have the opportunity to invite you to a couple of parks. I don't know if you're prepared to offer the reminders about, when you're on the tour, we wouldn't want you to conduct any park business or committee business. This is truly just an opportunity to learn about the park and enjoy the park, and certainly you can visit, but we wouldn't want to conduct this committee's business while on the park tour. So just a friendly reminder about that as we move forward, because we want all of our committee business to be accessible to the public who may be monitoring the committee. So with that reminder, I think we would adjourn the meeting, but then turn it over to Rob and Jen to discuss the logistics of the park tour opportunity, if that sounds right.
I think that does. All right, then I will adjourn the meeting and we'll get to the vote.
Thank you, virtual people.